Hi, this is Ren.
And this is Casey.
And this is All Walks of Film. So, we are now covering Season 4, Episode 6 of Black Mirror, Black Museum. I wasn't quite sure what to expect with this episode, given the title and given kind of how it started out. I honestly thought it was going to be sort of something having to do with race in America, or, you know, something similar to Get Out. I was not sure where this was going.
I'm sorry, I just think that's funny because, the title of the show is called Black Mirror.
Yeah, but you have...
for me personally, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, it's probably a museum about technology.
And see, when I see that, and I see it takes place in America, and I see that the main character has an old style, 50s car, I think that this is a black museum taking us back to, a time of race in America, which could have made an interesting episode, but the episode that we got was a lot more interesting. Something I wasn't even expecting. So this woman,
Nish,
she is trying to charge her car, solar charge car. So because
that is the way of the future.
And that's pretty cool. And solar charging does take time, especially when you're trying to charge a whole vehicle. I assume that would take a couple hours. At least. But, I don't know what the time frame is on this. I don't know how far the technology is. The show is wonderfully enigmatic about that.
The show said it was 3 hours to charge her car.
Okay.
Anyway.
But that being said, so she goes into this museum, which is labeled Rollo Haynes Black Museum. And going in, and especially since the first face that we see is the woman from the White Bear episode, I was like, okay, this, you have a black woman, and then you have another episode prominently featuring a black person. Then you have the person that's going to prison, who is also black. The racial aspect of it is very heavily present in this episode.
But, it always is in Black Mirror.
It is, but...
it's not like Black Mirror is a show that's populated by exclusively white people or anything like that.
No, I understand what you're saying, but, the fact that you call it Black Museum, and then, the first people that I see in the museum are black people, I'm sorry, but that's the first thing I think of.
There was one white woman in the museum.
Yeah, well, that's later on. I'm saying this was my introduction, and then Rollo starts telling the story about this doctor who was testing out new technology. It was an implant, really gnarly implant inside of in his neck and pointing to his brain, which allowed him to feel what other people felt. And, at first it was helping him to become a better doctor. And I know that we had talked before about wouldn't it be awesome if Black Mirror actually had technology that could help people? And this certainly was a technology that could help people. The problem is he wasn't satisfied with the technology. I did think it was really interesting how it showed how he was using the technology to benefit people and save lives first. And then
to benefit himself.
I will say it was kind of fascinating.
Sexually.
Yeah. The sex scene was kind of fascinating because I always have kind of thought about what would it be like to experience both at the same time. You okay?
Yeah, okay. Go on.
And as it progresses, he starts to develop a tolerance for pain since he is not able to actually have the physical damage done to himself. He starts, testing various people that are on the verge of dying and everything like that.
No.
Yes.
That's not how it goes down. He experienced death. And that's what
later
triggered
on.
him. No, that's what triggered him. He was trying to save a guy he couldn't diagnose, and the dude died. And he felt the sensation of dying and survived. And that triggered him into pursuing more and more painful responses and experiences.
Right. And then he got disbarred from...
Because he was letting people die because of it.
Yeah.
To feel that again.
And then he decides to harm himself.
And it doesn't work.
But that scene where he's removing teeth and cutting up his face and all that kind of stuff, that was super gnarly. It was really intense. But that doesn't do it for him. So he decides to go to a back alley and put the device on a homeless man and then drill his brain in. And he gets sexual pleasure from it. Now, yeah,
okay, that was a stretch created by the narrator.
Right, but he was...
It was a funny image, though.
He was getting a euphoria from killing this man.
Yeah, but the narrator didn't literally go into a coma with a boner. I mean...
Right. No, that was something that the narrator embellished because he's a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy is the devil incarnate, essentially.
Well, he's a true sociopath.
Yeah. So then we have the next story, which is Jack and Claire. Carrie. So they're a great couple. Carrie gets hit by a truck. It is kind of one of those gag shots, though. I mean, we've seen them in comedies and stuff like that, where anytime I'm primed for this now. Anytime somebody backs up without looking, it's oh, they're gonna get hit by a vehicle.
But who drives like that in a park? She's literally in a park, Central Park.
Yeah, that was a bit of a stretch. I wish they had just made it on a street or something like that.
Yeah. It could have been a cul-de-sac or something like that.
Right. The location where she got hit was a bit of a stretch. Mm-hmm. But that being said, Rollo then comes to Jack and says, there is a way to communicate with your wife who's in a coma, and we're going to transfer her consciousness into your brain.
Again, using that same Lucy-style idea of, well, we don't use all of our brain anyway, so we can just fit a whole other consciousness in there. No, that's not how that works. You don't use 10% or 40% or whatever the fuck of your brain. You have a brain because you use your brain.
Well, based on the episode, from my understanding, it was using similar technology that they used in San Junipero.
No, but he does literally say, oh, hey, well, you know how we only use 40% of our brain and the other 60% is just an Airbnb, just completely empty and not doing anything? We can fit a whole consciousness in there.
Yeah, and that's based on false science.
Yeah.
But the
that
concept
seems to be this guy's bread and butter, too, to a certain extent. It's kind of like when Han Solo says parsecs, and you're well, that's not right. And it's no, but he's making shit up. He's trying to sound cool, he knows what he's talking about, and he clearly does it.
Yeah, so at first, you see the relationship going, and it's a really invasive concept to have somebody else, present with you, inside of your body, as you're doing everything, and Jack gets fed up with it, because Carrie is understandably annoying. It's one of those things where, I can understand that eating at you, but at the same time, that is a person.
Right.
So at first he finds out that there is a pause button, and after she lectures him about checking out a girl in the elevator, he decides to use the pause button. And then she wakes up at Halloween time,
which was weeks later.
Yeah, it was 8 weeks? Yeah. And then he meets a next door neighbor. He has the hots for her. She's into him. Carrie's obviously not feeling it. So he wonders to himself, what's another option? And talks to Rollo again, and he says, well, you could just delete her. And then he's I can't do that. So what they decide to do instead is transfer her consciousness into a monkey.
A stuffed monkey, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's exactly like she's going back to being in the coma, because when she was in the coma, she could only communicate with a light that says yes or no. And now with the monkey, she can still only do positive reaction and negative reaction. And those are her only two options.
And
there's a great scene where the new mommy is threatening the consciousness of Carrie. So she has like this stuffed animal pinned to the wall, and she's like, "You listen here, you bitch! Are you gonna be a good toy?" That was a great bit of acting, because like she really sold it, and she was deadpan, but it was really hysterical.
Well, I like the fact that she tilted the monkey's head a little bit, so the monkey
she tried to give the monkey some expression with her hands. You know, that was really good bit of acting.
Yeah. And so, she only has those two options, and she's just pressing them back and forth. And then, after a while, kid gets tired of the toy and just leaves it.
She ends up in the museum, still conscious.
Yeah, that was a really uncomfortable moment when you could see that, she was still trying to communicate when Niche picked her up.
Mm-hmm.
This whole episode was just full of uncomfortable moment after uncomfortable moment. It was incredibly tense, and I would say the most disturbing episode of Black Mirror that I've seen. And I would say even more so than Shut Up and Dance and National Anthem.
Okay, that's your opinion. I don't really agree, because part of it is the guy in Rollo, he's a quack. And, the episode, it is really intriguing, and it is kind of nerve-wracking, but it still has a lot of humor to it, which is good. It's a lot of really good storytelling, but it's also kind of odd because there are all these Easter eggs to other episodes, which they've done before. But his museum is supposed to be a collection of criminal artifacts, specifically. So there's the iPad from the Archangel episode where Sarah beats her mother over the head with the iPad, And there's the bathtub from Crocodile where the woman in that episode murdered the investigator's husband. There's the hood from White Bear with the gun. But the stories that he's talking about are from his days in neuroscience. So I'm like, what, was he also a pioneer in Archangel? Was he also behind the technology that the investigator was using? How does he end up with all these things? Because he seems to be directly connected to all of his stories. So is he the evil criminal mastermind behind every episode of Black Mirror? That's a little much.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean that would essentially be making him the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt, which now that you mention it, I don't know if that quite jives. It might just be. I mean, it seems a little bit more than just an Easter egg. So
exactly, it seems like he must be directly tied to every single one of these crimes. Oh, the bee drones, too, because those were there.
Yeah, from Hated in the Nation.
But also, he is a quack. He's not sophisticated enough to do a lot of that technology. So I felt almost like he was kind of more like Ares in the Wonder Model movie, where he's just the incarnation of the evil nature of humans to misuse technology.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
I might be overthinking it, but that was just sort of the vibe I was getting from it. The actor does a really good job selling this character, though.
Yeah, it is sort of a larger-than-life character, and I think that there are many actors that couldn't pull it off, and he does a really good job of being funny,
and
menacing.
Charismatic, and menacing, and just kind of douchey.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do any one of those things too much. He doesn't lay it on too thick.
Right. So, that being said, next up we have Clay, who was on death row. We saw him at the very beginning of the episode. He was convicted of killing a reporter. He claims his innocence, And
the episode also heavily implies that he is totally innocent. Like, there was DNA testing that proved that he wasn't the killer, and there was a documentary series trying to reveal his innocence, and there were a lot of protesters, because they thought that it was wrongful. And even in his private conversations, he admits, like, he's really adamant about how he's innocent,
Right, and
it does seem to be sort of like a Making a Murderer case, or like one of those episodes of the confession tapes, something like that, where it does seem like it is supposed to be in reality like a real miscarriage of justice.
Right, and so Rollo offers, what's the deal that he says? He's like, oh, well, we can
save your conscious mind, and if you allow us to, like, save your consciousness when you die in a digital format as a hologram, we'll provide for your family financially.
Yeah, so he's taking the fall so that his family can be provided for.
Well, it's not based on whether he's innocent or guilty. He's like, well, I'm going to be proven innocent, so it doesn't matter. But if I am, like, if it doesn't work out, you guys will be taken care of. And he specifically says, like, he doesn't believe that it's going to actually work. He's like, no, it's going to be like a computer program with my face on it. It's not going to be me.
But it is.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting is he is killed by the electric chair, something that has been essentially banned.
Well, there were a few interesting things about that, because Rollo says he's the first man to survive his own execution, which is not true. There's actually been like a phenomenon of, especially lately in contemporary America, of people surviving their own executions, because a lot of nations in the world don't agree with any sort of death penalty. And the chemical that's traditionally used with lethal injections, which was the advancement from the electric chair, the electric chair's too inhumane, we'll do a lethal injection so you die instantly. We were getting that imported from Europe, and the companies that were manufacturing it in Europe said that they weren't going to make the stuff anymore. Just done. We're not making it, we're not exporting it, you gotta do something else. So in America, there's been like some experimentation with trying to develop new stuff for lethal injections that's led to a lot of people surviving their own executions.
Like using different chemicals and such.
Right, exactly. And it's been putting people in a lot of pain, and it's been really, really terrible. So considering that, the idea of going back to the electric chair again, but like a more refined one, seems like a logical place for that technology to go into the future. Like, that didn't seem as contrived as some other things they've done this season.
I mean, I did think it was interesting that they specifically used like an old style electrocution chair and not like something that looked a little bit more modern,
mm-hmm.
which once again brings back memories to African American men that have been wrongfully convicted and put to the electric chair.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think that while you say that the black is referring to the Black Mirror thing, I do think that the episode is significantly trying to point out the racial disparity, especially near the end when it's addressed to the character of Rollo.
Okay.
So his consciousness does transfer into the afterlife. And then the craziest thing that I wasn't expecting happened. It becomes a tourist spot to just crank the electric chair up to 10 and then get a souvenir of his painful face onto a little keychain trinket.
It's a segment of his consciousness.
Yeah. It was definitely like the most disturbing part. And what was really interesting was this episode really tapped into a lot of existential horror that I've seen several episodes sort of teeter with, but like this just pushed it like way more. Like the Christmas episode had a little bit of that, where it was like transferring consciousness to inanimate objects and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like when I saw him in the electric chair, like constantly dying, well, not even dying, but like constantly experiencing
tortured.
Yeah.
There's no other word for it.
Yeah, that was that was really intense, and I will say that this episode definitely triggered my empathy more than most episodes of Black Mirror.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I did really appreciate, especially a show that is a UK show. They do sort of have their, like, sort of token American episodes, I would say, in every season. But I did really appreciate the fact that they were trying to talk about a political issue in contemporary America that we really need to talk about, which is the inhumane nature of the death penalty.
Right. Yeah, this episode really blew me away. And especially since we had a couple episodes before that, weren't really jiving with us, I'm glad that this season ended on a high note.
Sort of.
Okay.
I mean, I think it was one of the better episodes of this season, but I still don't really think this is one of the best episodes. Especially because I was really getting into it when it became the revenge flick, because you find out that Niche is Clay's daughter, and that she poisoned Rollo, and it was cool how, like, she was talking to him and kind of, like, batting around with him and poisoned him and killed him. I was down with all of that, and that was kind of, like, the most rewarding part of the episode. But then she is able to use the technology to transfer his consciousness inside the digital consciousness of Clay. Somehow. She just finds out by accident, oh, by the way, that works. Like, that's literally just how she says it. She's just like, oh, I just tried it and it happened to work. Cool. And then she pulls the lever and she gets the little bauble of Rollo's, consciousness suffering for eternity and puts it on her rearview mirror. And I thought that was cute. But she saves Carrie, which I really liked. I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. It's going to be awesome to see, like, Niche and Carrie, like, they have nothing in common, but she's, taking her out of pity and they'll be friends. That's cool. And she burns the place down and she gets in the car and starts talking to her mom, who's in the same condition that Carrie was in originally, where she has her mom's consciousness implanted inside her own consciousness.
And how did she do that without Rollo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if, there's no way she didn't do it without Rollo, because they would know. He knows who they are. Unless, because there's no way he wouldn't recognize Niche. That doesn't make any sense.
Unless he did it with a ton of different people.
No, because he recognized the mom, and especially because the mom came to visit.
Right. Okay, yeah.
There's no way if he put the mother's consciousness inside Niche, he wouldn't know who Niche was. There's just no way that would work. And to me, it seemed really simple. At the end, why doesn't she just talk to Carrie?
Yeah, that could have just been fine. I get what you're saying about the episode sort of jumping the shark with that moment. I still think it was a really visceral and powerful episode.
I liked, all the individual short stories a lot. And it was just the overarching narrative in the background that was really pushing my buttons the wrong way. And a big part of it is Black Mirror in previous seasons has been at such a high standards that even a really good episode is a step down. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not saying oh, I fucking hate Black Mirror now, or I hate this season, but I mean, before this season, I would say every episode of Black Mirror was perfect. Every single time it was perfect. And this season had a lot of weaknesses and a lot of things that I think just weren't thought out very well. So even though it goes down from a 5 to a 4, a 4 is still really good, but that's kind of a step down. You see what I mean?
Yeah, and
it's not that it's actually bad.
Right. I don't know. I'm definitely going to have to watch this episode again, just because I'm just coming off of watching this episode. We're both coming off of just watching this episode. So I think a lot of my reaction right now is just a very visceral one. The fact that this episode was triggering all sorts of those empathy spikes in my brain. It was an exhausting episode, and it worked on me. some of the logistics are a little bit wonky, but the overall visceral emotion, I think, worked really well.
The only thing I'm kind of concerned about is, like, everything about this episode felt very much like a series finale.
Yeah.
And it almost could be like all of these artifacts could be like stories he's been telling in the museum of all these different things he's found, and it could sort of bring into light whether or not they're actually true. Which I wouldn't mind. I think that's kind of a cool way to take it. He has these collections of sort of like contemporary Aesop fables. Like, I dig that. That's cool.
Yeah, and it's sort of like a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum.
Yeah, I dig that. And, kind of bringing into question whether or not these stories are real and does it really matter? Like, what do you take away from them? I like that as a theme, but I'm like, this is at the end, right? Please tell me this isn't the season finale, or like the series finale. Like, there's more, right?
I'm pretty sure there is more, because I heard that Jodie Foster directed 2 episodes.
And she only did 1 this season. I hope so. I just kind of get a little bit paranoid about that sometimes, especially with TV shows that could be canceled at any moment.
Well, it is Netflix, and this is a pretty popular show.
But they canceled Sense8, and that was a really popular show.
Yeah, but like Sense8 was not in the cultural consciousness like Black Mirror is.
Yeah, it was. They shut it down because it was too damn expensive.
And Black Mirror is it expensive?
I would assume, yeah, it's probably really expensive. I'm sure it is. I mean, I don't think that it's $8 million an episode expensive or anything like that.
Right. And I know the Get Down was like their most expensive one that they did.
And they canceled that one too.
Right. That and Marco Polo was like, but they are working in collaboration with the BBC still.
And the BBC has to cancel things all the time. I mean, I think a big part of the reason why Black Mirror is an anthology show is the BBC has a really hard time keeping actors because they can't pay them enough to be there.
Yeah, that is a huge problem with the BBC shows.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever wondered why so many people die on Downton Abbey, that's why.
Yeah.
It's because the actors won't stick around.
But, to like a certain extent, that I like that because it like raises the stakes. It's like anybody can die.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. But I'm just saying, like, I really hope this isn't the way it goes out.
Yeah, so I take it you were just okay with the episode, right?
I mean, I think it's like a 4 or 4.5.
Okay.
It's just, I'm used to, like, every part of it being a home run, so it's still disappointing, but I still think the best episode this season was Archangel. That's still my favorite this season. That was knockout. Perfect from beginning to end, just...
Yeah, and I would like to see another episode that was like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not too similar to that, but, like, something to that level of greatness.
Right. Something that's more... I think one of my problems with this season, too, that was also in this episode is there was a lot of retreading old ground. And Archangel was definitely the same thing, but Archangel was expanding it in a new direction. Whereas some stuff like, what was it? The Hang the DJ, I feel like, was actually going backwards with some of their old ideas. And this one just seemed to sort of walk around the same ideas and technology. Like, they specifically mentioned the stuff from San Junipero where, like, old people upload their consciousness to the cloud, They're literally just talking about the same gadgets and stuff we've already seen and not really taking it any particular direction. And my hope is that, things are always getting better and better and evolving more and more.
Yeah, I definitely hope that this show continues to go on. But I will say that the good news is there's a new show coming out on Amazon called Electric Dreams, and that's another anthology show that I'm really excited about.
I was really excited about it, but then I got salty when I saw the Nuvi Insider exclusive preview, whatever nonsense, where they just did not highlight Janelle Monáe at all. And that's what I'm most excited about. I want to see Cindy Mayweather doing some, electric sheep shit. I want to see that. And they're just like, we're not going to name check her or do an interview. We're going to show like one very short clip with her face. And it's like, that's not a good reason to be salty, mind you. That is not a good reason to be salty.
Yeah, especially because we don't know how much Janelle Monáe is going to be in it, or.
But if she's not in it much, I'm definitely going to be salty.
And it's very possible that there was another interview with her that was like a full interview. So we'll look for that when that comes out. So if you would like us to cover that, please leave it in the comments below. Also, if you liked our Black Mirror discussion and want us to go back, consider donating to our Patreon, and we'll definitely consider doing that. If you throw in like $1 or $2, we'll certainly consider going back and watching the episodes and commenting on them. I will certainly try to watch episodes a couple times before we discuss it. That way I can actually like fully break down the episodes and talk with it, especially since, while we were having conversations, there was stuff that I missed out because I just watched the episode. I mean, you don't always catch everything the first time you watch something, so that's on me. That being said, I'm really looking forward to our award show that we're going to be doing. That's going to be on mid to late January. It's going to sort of be a podcast video hybrid of sorts. So please go to our Facebook site and put in your votes.
All right. Thanks for listening.